Hi everybody, welcome to today's video. So in this video I'm going to talk about a more specific kind of possession. So this kind of possession is when something is trying to overtake your body rather than just feeding off of your energy or trying to drain you of energy. So most of my other videos are about things, negative attachments, cords, things like that, things that have to do with your actual energy body, which is typically not something that we're taught how to control, which is, part of the reason I make these videos. So in this video, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. So this is when something is actually has overtaken someone's body or is trying to overtake their body, and how the way to deal with this is a little bit different than the way that you would deal with something that just has to do with energy. So that's sort of what this video is going to be about. So I'll start off by sharing a personal experience. So we had to, like I said in my other video, I was out of the country for like 3 weeks. So we had to sort of, we ended up boarding our cats, which probably is something we won't do again, but in this case it was kind of inevitable. So one of the cats, when I brought her home, she just seemed really off, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" She just stares at me like, and I'm like, "Oh boy." And then she kept meowing at me, and I was like, "Oh, I think something has happened to you with your body. Something else is in there." I could see it in her eyes. I could feel its energy. It was like a palpable energy of something else being in that body. So, the kenneling experience was extremely stressful for them, unfortunately. They told us that the dogs would be in a different part of the kennel, but they weren't. They were like right there, so the cats were unfortunately extremely stressed out. So I believe what happened is that being so, physically uncomfortable and whatnot, one of the cats sort of wanted to just like escape their body. Like that became sort of an intention. Like this is like too much for me. This is too stressful. So it's the intention of like wanting to get out of your body that can, and not always of course, but can draw in the type of energy. It also depends sort of like where you are, the circumstances. If you're at a vet office, there's a lot of dead animals, a lot of the spirits of dead animals that are still just there because they have to put a lot of animals down in some veterinary offices. So for her, I sort of tried the usual methods of trying to clear her energy, trying to remove this entity that had entered her body. And then I was thinking about it, and she's like, meowing at me like, help. And I was like, yeah, I'm working on it. Like, give me a second, So what happens is that there's this sort of, it can start with an intention of like, I want to be out of this body. Okay. So then something else can come in with that intention. Of course, doesn't always happen, but it can come in with that intention. And then it becomes like a partial possession where there's, the soul or energy of an entity also in the body, and its intention has nothing to do, and this is what makes it different, is that its intention has nothing to do with the actual energy of the person or creature that it's possessing. What it wants is to actually be in a body. So that's the intention. So that's what makes it different than most of the other things that I talk about in the different videos. So what ended up working, so I tried a few different things with energy that I normally do. It didn't really work, and I was like, okay, this is a little bit different because it doesn't actually have to do with her energy. It wants to be in her body, right? So what ended up working for me was that I sort of thought about it, and I was like, okay, so it wants to be in her body. How do I make the body uncomfortable? How do I get it out without, obviously hurting the animal or making it feel uncomfortable, even like energetically, So what I ended up doing was I created it was almost sort of like a magnet, like repelling, how when you put two sides of the same sides of a magnet together, they will like repel each other. So, as a god, if, what gods, for lack of a better word, have the ability to do is sort of go into each person's body, because again, it's like that's their creation, it's their universe. So they're not taking over the body, but they're able to see, from each person's perspective. They're able to sort of enter they feel everything that's happening in their universe at once. So that's sort of what being a god is in my mind. So then what I was like, okay, so if you think you're a god because you can just like enter, someone's body and then just think you can just stay there, I'm going to make you feel everything that's happening in the universe at once. So it's kind of like that movie that recently came out, Everything All at Once, which is sort of where I started to get the idea. I was like, okay, maybe I can try this. So I created sort of like an intention, like an energy that's sort of like, as long as it stays in that body, it's going to have to feel everything happening in the universe at once. Because I'm like, well, you think you're a god, right? You can just go and like take over this body. So why don't you feel everything that's happening in this universe at once? So I use that as sort of like a magnet pull energy to sort of push it out of the body. And then at this point, I could visibly see the shift in the cat's body that it had entered, that it was like partially possessing, because she came over, started like slow blinking, which is what cats do when they're like happy or relieved, rubbing against my legs. Like, okay, so she feels better. And then she went off, stopped meowing at me, and took a very long nap. So I figured she was fine at that point. But then the other problem was that now this thing was in my house. And I could feel it staring at me, because the kind of energy that these things have that want to possess a body is a very different energy to me than something that just wants to feed off of your energy, something that, wants to become attached to you. And this is on like an energetic level, which is where most of these happen, because again, most of us don't know how to control our energy, but we tend to have, pretty good control of our body. We've at least been taught how to control our body, how to take care of it, things like that. Not so much with our energy. So then I use the same kind of pull, the magnetism, to push it out of the house and then away, as far away as it would take for me to not feel as energy or be, sense it anymore, basically. So that was how I used basically the same method, just push it out of the house. So I wouldn't have to like deal with it staring at me and like watching me and just waiting for an opportunity, It's very, very creepy. Probably creepier than an Archon, honestly. So that was how I dealt with that situation. And then, so that was with an animal, but what if it happens with a person? So with people, I can recall maybe one incident that I can remember where I met a person. And it was interesting because this person that I met was when I was working at like this genocide museum. So, obviously like a very, very heavy energy, lots of spirits in the building, that I did help to cross over, at least some of them. But it's a very specific feeling you get. I don't really know how to describe it, but that scenario is one that came to mind, where it feels like the host's soul, the soul that the body belongs to, that it chose, that it incarnated into, right, sort of has this intention of going on autopilot. It just doesn't want to really try anymore. This just doesn't feel maybe a strong connection to its body. I don't know the exact reason. That's what it seemed like in this scenario that I remember seeing. So, they don't always realize it, because again, it's like when something in this scenario, the possessing entity was human. So sometimes the human entities or possessions are a little bit harder for the person to notice, because again, it's not like something totally like weird and abnormal. It's just like another human energy. So that's sort of the negative downside of that. The positive side is that the human entities are pretty much always weaker and less, powerful than like a non-human entity. So, the non-human entity would obviously be pretty rare, would be like what we would call like a demonic possession, where it's not something human that's possessing the body. So that I don't think is very common, but the human entity possessing like another human's body, because they want the experience of the body. They don't want to, cross over and get a new body, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe they just don't know how it works, or they don't care, but it's always this very heavy, it's a very creepy energy. It's a very like, it's different than someone who just wants your energy, like some kind of abuser or something like that. It's like it's just like a creepy energy. Like, think about if you're like sleeping and then all of a sudden you feel like a hand on your shoulder. Like, it's that sort of like creepiness where they want the body. So those are my experiences working with this type of energy, and how it is slightly different than the kinds of energies that need to feed off of something. This is like an intention that I want to inhabit this body. So I hope that made sense. Feel free to leave any questions or anything else below, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.